Hello, welcome to another video blog edition of the Dreizin Report. Thanks so much for watching. Now, still have a few people that don't appreciate this hat, don't appreciate this word. They think it doesn't do justice to the seriousness of the matters that I discuss with the war and everything, and that it's too lighthearted and shouldn't be poking fun at authority because authority is holy. And I understand that point of view. I mean, there's some people that are just very subservient. I totally get it. I want to respect you all. And at the same time, the platform that we're on, that we're watching, that we all take advantage of here, this platform, right? They don't like words like this because it was explained to me they run it through a speech recognition, and then they scan the transcript. And if there's words like this, then I get less advertising money. So that's less money, right? So we want the money. So basically, we're not going to use this word anymore. If we ever talk about the guy again, we're going to call him Mr. Touchy-feely. Okay, so Mr. Touchy-feely or Mr. Gropey. If you hear me using the words Mr. Gropey or Mr. Touchy-feely, you'll know we're talking about this gentleman. If there's someone out there in Bangladesh or Burkina Faso who wants to, write a comment in the comments section here, like, I don't understand who is this guy? Who is Mr. Gropey? Who is Mr. Touchy-feely? I don't get it. Can someone please explain it to me? Please help out your fellow man or woman. Let them know exactly who we're talking about here, because I may not be explaining it in every single subsequent show, so please help people out. Now, I want to talk about racism. Here at the Dreizin Report, we are very, very much against racism. We condemn racism in all its forms, especially state-sanctioned racism, especially racism that is paid for by the United States government. Now, I'd like to bring your attention to a tweet from Radio Svoboda, which is the Russian edition of Radio Europe / Radio Free Liberty, which is the one of the largest, or probably the largest single branch of the U.S. government overseas propaganda complex, besides Hollywood, of course. And but this is a quasi-official government agency or a government corporation, or Quango for you Brits, or something like that. They put out a tweet in Russian. I'm going to read it in Russian. And then I'll for you Russian folks out there, so you can appreciate, and then I'll translate. And keep in mind, this tweet didn't come in a vacuum. This is what their broadcasts look like all the time. I mean, this just they pull this kind of stuff all the time. But just a tweet because it's short and condensed here. Now keep in mind, I believe, as some Russians can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the Russian dissident Andrei Babitsky actually worked at Radio Svoboda, but if he found it so toxic, because even back in like 2008 or 2010, it had been totally taken over by nationalist Ukrainians who really hated Russia and just basically wanted to make it into a platform to promote Ukrainian nationalism to a Russian audience at U.S. government expense, right? So basically, the whole shop just got taken over by these nationalist Ukrainians, and you had this Russian dissident working there who was actually, turns out, a Russian patriot. He just happened to run afoul of the Russian government while he was interviewing terrorists during the Second Chechen War. This Babitsky fellow, and it was so toxic that he actually quit and went back to Russia. I mean, this is unheard of. You don't hear about people like going back after they've fled the country because their life is in danger, and now he went back. It was like, this never happens. And so they gave him a job, and it was worked out well for him. But anyway, so here's the tweet. This is referring to, of course, the Russian soldiers in the Ukraine allegedly looting. Now, here's in Russian, then I'll translate it for you. For our Russian viewers, «Я читал, что один солдат украл электрочайник, но не взял саму подставку, которая подключается к розетке, потому что никогда не видел электрических чайников. Это страшно, нищета в России, когда объединяющей мыслью становится возможность пограбить». So that translates into, now they're quoting someone, it's not clear, but I read that one soldier stole or looted an electric tea kettle, but he didn't actually take the base of it that with the cord that plugs into the wall, right? Because he had never seen an electric tea kettle in his life. This is frightening. Poverty in Russia, when the unifying thought of everyone there, of this whole society, becomes the prospect of just looting, of looting and stealing. So the unifying thought of Russians is they're so poor that their unifying thought in their society, the one wavelength that they're all on, the one thing holding society together, is the prospect or the promise of being able to loot something, just to grab and pilfer something. So this is just great. I mean, but this fits with the longtime Ukrainian propaganda that they're eating cats and rats in Crimea and everything's so bad. And I mean, I've heard this from my babysitter and everything. It's like some people actually like really believe this. I mean, except Russians. It's like, okay, well, they live in Russia and they're not eating cats and rats, but this is just classic. Now, keep in mind, what if the U.S. government had a tweet where, or an agency or a quasi-governmental body of the U.S. government had a tweet when they said, well, if you look at these slightly darker skin-toned minorities who live in America, you look at these slightly darker skin-toned minorities who live in America, and it turns out that if you look at the one unifying thought that they all have, it's just about looting. It's about looting. It's all they think about. It's like the one, like some of them like coffee and some of them like tea, but the one thing that unifies them is they love to loot. That would be racist. It would be, I would totally condemn. We could totally condemn all forms of racism, homophobia, and trans exclusive feminism here at the Dreizin Report. So, can you imagine? I mean, that would be pretty crazy. They would never do it, of course. I mean, why would they do it? But with Russians, it's okay. It's okay because they're they're the enemy. So it's okay to be racist. So some forms of racism are okay. Calling a country a gas station and that it's just vodka soaked gas station and gas station of a country, that's okay. But for Trump to say that there's some whole countries, whole countries, right? That's not okay. But anyway, you remember Trump, don't you? He was our president for a few good years. I'm not voting for him again because I'm over politics, and it was fun while it lasted. I hope he retires, but it was fun while it lasted. Anyway, so I'd like to talk a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll get into something else very interesting. I got a lot of good feedback in the comments section when I asked, in my last video, like, what would you folks go for as far as like when I finally leave YouTube, would you pay $2-3 behind a paywall, whatever. Got some really good feedback, enormous amount of feedback. I appreciate it. I really have a way forward now. I think, the thing with YouTube is it's really, really good because there's so many people on it, like all over the world, that it's really good for building a following quickly. But as I said, once in a few months, once I, double, triple, quadruple the following I have now, and I really appreciate all you folks. Once I do that, I think it'll be time to leave. And at that point, I can go to another medium. I think it's clear now that I won't be behind a paywall because there's a lot of people, in Bosnia or Mongolia or whatever that even, can't afford $2-3 a month. At the same time, if they were to pay monthly, there's a foreign transaction fee that they might have to pay like $50 to donate $2 or something like that. So, we'll just do it as a sort of voluntary thing. Won't actually have a hard paywall, but that's for a little bit in the future, at least a few months away. But I appreciate all the feedback. Now I want to say to those dum-dums that said, well, look, why you're so greedy, man? You're like a capitalist. Why you trying to raise $2-3 a month off me when you just made $250,000 on an investment investing in fertilizer? And why you trying to pass out the hat? And like some greedy capitalist. Well, look, I'm not. You don't know all my expenses, right? I have. I'd like to be able to pay my tech support guy, who's probably put in about $25,000 of billable work so far for me that I haven't given him a cent. I haven't paid him a cent. He's a good friend. He volunteered to help me. Ultimately, I've committed to hopefully compensating him in some way. I'm not going to go into the details, but we need some type of revenues for that. And you might be wondering, why does a YouTube channel cost $25,000? Because mostly not even YouTube, it's mostly my blog, and even just setting up the the bulk mailing system on my blog, and standing it up and integrating it with the blog was probably about a week and a half of work for him right there. Not like maybe 10 hours a day, but maybe 5 hours a day or something like that. But it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. And he's doing all this voluntarily. He has a day job, then he stays up, half the night working for me. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. And for some idiots to say that I have to pay for this out of my own pocket, because, you have a right to infotainment, and, doggone those capitalists that want to get, $2-3 from you. I mean, that, that's, hey, it's called the free shit army, right? There's always a, there's always a free shit army wanting free shit, but, excuse me, everything costs money. And I'm not paying for it out of my own pocket. I mean, basically, I'm not necessarily expecting a return, but we need to cover our expenses here at the Dreizin Report. If you haven't checked out my blog, please do it. There's a lot of people, I keep talking, look at my blog, look at my blog, look at my blog. Excuse me. And I get a lot of emails of people, signing up for my blog mailing list, and they still don't check my blog. Our metrics are just abysmal. Out of the people that open I update the blog almost every day. We send out emails, with the updates, and out of those, only about a third out of the people that open the emails, only about a third are actually clicking on the link and going to the blog, which is just pathetic. So, folks, let's have a literacy program here. Reading is fundamental. I know you like seeing stuff on YouTube, but you got to read. Like, you can't forget how to read, please. I mean, I know, it's fun to like look at flickering stuff on a screen, but on my blog, I'm not really going to even talk about the war so much here. I'm going to cover it on my blog. If you want the best war updates in town, go to my blog. And on top of that, if you want to know what I'm investing in now or what I'm gambling on, I'm not going to talk about it here. I had a lot of inquiries. It's on my blog. You might have to go down a few, read till the end, whatever, but it's there. Now, I want to give you a special little treat. This is a story about synchronicity. I believe in synchronicity, and it has certainly manifested in my life. But I want to give a little story about why is the U.S. intelligence complex so incompetent. And my friend Larry Johnson over at sonar21.com, he recently had a piece talking about how the CIA is calling the Russian army hollow because it doesn't have enough sergeants, and it's just a bunch of privates and officers, and there's not enough sergeants in between, and so it's a hollow army. They can't get anything done. Okay. Aside from the fact that they're comparing it to the U.S. Army or the U.S. Marine Corps, which is grotesquely over heavy with sergeants. I mean, literally on every infantry fire team in the U.S. Army or in the Marine Corps, you have like at least one staff sergeant grade E6, which is totally unnecessary and ridiculous. I mean, the personnel expenses and everything, I mean, it's just ridiculous. You don't need a one staff sergeant for every three corporals and privates. It's totally ridiculous. But they're comparing it to our model and saying the Russian army doesn't work because they don't have enough, they don't have enough sergeants. Well, it's ridiculous, but why are these people so incompetent? And Larry says, well, they've hired a lot of wokesters recently, but it's not recent. They've always been incompetent. They missed everything. They missed ISIS. They missed Crimea. They missed 9/11. I mean, they just, they missed the collapse of the USSR. They miss everything. They have no predictive capability at all. It's just, I mean, it's like a bunch of Muppets, man. The best things they can do, if you give them a budget of $80 billion, they can go and, after 10 years where bin Laden's hiding in plain sight out there on the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan, after 10 years of him hiding in plain sight, someone finally rats him out. They go kill him, and then they make a big fake movie out of it that's a bunch of crap. So they can do that, but they certainly can't predict anything, and they're not very good for analysis. So what's going on here? Well, let me give you, I'm not going to answer it completely and wholly because I can't. But let me give you my little experience here, and you tell me if this blows your mind or not. So in the summer of 2005, at the federal job that I was at the time, it had no direct relevance to U.S. foreign policy, but it had some relevance to U.S. trade policy, and they had some money to burn. And in the government, if you don't spend everything by the end of the budget year, you have to give it back, right? So they were like, take some training. We need to burn through this money. Everyone go and take some training, and training costs money. So what I did was I signed up for a couple of classes, a 1-week class and then another 1-week class over at the the Foreign Service Institute. The Foreign Service Institute in Arlington, Virginia, just off Route 50 in Arlington, Virginia. What this is sort of it's sort of a language and culture school for diplomats and consular staff working for the State Department, so that before they get sent abroad for their next assignment, they come back stateside. They go to this school where they get a crash course in the language and culture of whatever country they're going to be going to next, right? On the whole, we had some really smart lectures. I was shocked, and I was taking, among other things, so I was taking like a Middle East culture class or something like that, or Arab culture, something like that. And we had one incredibly interesting lecture, and he wasn't talking about the Arabs that day, but he was talking about Iran, and he was talking about how right after the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979, the CIA was telling the rest of the government and the president that, hey, look at the Ayatollah. He's on TV. They're showing him on TV, and he just looks. He's not saying anything. He's like, it's almost like he's incapacitated. He's not saying anything. He looks tired. He looks like he's gonna just dodder off or something. He's not saying anything. He probably isn't really capable of saying anything. He's kind of like this guy, right? And nothing coherent. So they just kind of let him. They kind of let him sit in the background while his underlings and his young guys, his kind of whisperers, they do the talking for the cameras, and the Ayatollah just kind of sits there. And so it's obvious that this guy, is not going to last. The Ayatollah is not going to last. Either he'll die or he'll have to retire. They'll have to shuffle him off or something. So the Islamic Revolution, it's this guy, the Ayatollah, is the revolution. And because he's not long for this world, or he's going to have to be retired soon, that means that, the Islamic Revolution really isn't going anywhere because it's not going to have a leader, right? So they kept saying this, and they said it, week after week and month after month, and that Ayatollah ruled Iran with an iron fist for 10 years until he died, I believe, in 1989. So that's the CIA for you. So that was a very interesting lecture. It stuck in my mind, and he was talking obviously about how the CIA clearly did not have a competent Iran desk. They did not have any Iran specialists at the time, if ever. They didn't have people. They didn't have people who understand that the Ayatollahs, not just this one, but Ayatollahs in general, are just supposed to sit there and be quiet and just exert their gravitas while their underlings do their talking, because Ayatollahs, right, the high religious leaders in Shia Islam, they don't deign to talk to us mortals. They're like these holy guys, and they just kind of sit there and look pretty, and they don't talk on camera. They don't yap like some pundit or something. They let their underlings kind of sit at their feet and do their talking, while they're all quiet in public, right? And that's an Ayatollah. But the CIA didn't know that because they didn't have anybody who's competent, in Iranian language or Iranian culture or whatever. They don't know anything, and they're useless and they're worthless, basically. And they gave bad intelligence to the president. Okay. Fast forward 3 years, just over 3 years, and I start working for a private employer that is obviously not the government, but they're very closely involved in foreign policy, and I'll just leave it at that. I'm not gonna. I mean, they're very sensitive. They don't want to be talked about. Okay, so I just have to leave it at that. But my boss, he got the youngest people together a couple of times to, at lunch. Well, one of my bosses anyway. Now, it wasn't my direct boss, but I did report to him one way or another. And he would get a couple of times, he would get all the young people, or younger people anyway, 30 and under, to lunch, and then he would tell him about all his war stories and his life and everything, and it was like kind of meet the boss and find out what an interesting guy he is. And he was an interesting guy. And so one time, he told the story about how he was a young guy, straight out of a graduate school with a totally useless degree in political science, at the end of the 1960s, and then he basically went abroad to kind of try to find himself or whatever, and didn't do much there, and came back and basically hitched up with a lady and got married and had a kid, and they had a baby, and he had no real job, and I guess living off of his folks, and kind of desperate. And then the CIA called him back. And long story short, he started working for the CIA as an entry-level analyst at their headquarters in Langley, or wherever. I guess it's Langley. And he randomly just, they needed some guy for their Iran desk, so they put him on their Iran desk. So he spent, some years there, and kind of basically became ensconced as the CIA's Iran guy. And he, after some years and some more years, and by 1979, he was the Iran guy for the CIA. He was the Iran desk. Like, there was literally nobody else that was above him. There might have been some, young helpers or interns or something, but basically he was the Iran desk, and it was a very small desk. And so then the Islamic Revolution, and he had no knowledge of the language. He had no knowledge of the culture, the religion, nothing. It wasn't his specialty. But they just, they figured Iran is, nothing's going on with Iran. So we just, it's one of these countries, just hire a generalist, whatever. It doesn't matter who we hire for this, right? And then the Islamic Revolution happened. And he's telling us with great pride, right? He's recounting how He would brief. He would brief, if not the president, then at least the guy that briefs the president. And he would go to the White House, or if not the White House, then at least the Eisenhower building, that is to say, the National Security Council building, and he would present the CIA's take on what's going on in Iran. And he was so proud to recount the story that at the height of the Iran, the revolution and then the hostage crisis and all that stuff, at these peak moments, he would be in there every day, once a day, giving a daily briefing on Iran to the guy that briefs the president about Iran, among other things. And he was just so proud of it because it was like, he was still a relatively young professional at that time. And, it was like all him. Like he was the CIA's Iran guy, and he briefed the guy that briefed the president every day about Iran. And I'm thinking, man, wow. Like, I heard this story, but from a different angle, right? And this is like, I mean, what are the chances? It's just incredible. So I got the story from two different angles, and I never told him. I mean, why would I, just cause trouble and get fired, But I mean, that is like, that's synchronicity right there. I mean, that's like one of these coincidences that you only find in like Russian exotic literature, where it's like, this would never happen, this is stranger than fiction. Well, it happened. So I got the story from two different angles, and I think now today, with respect to Russia, as I've mentioned in one of my previous videos, I think they basically, they've been focusing so long on all the Arabs and Muslims and maybe now the Chinese, that they really just don't have anyone left who knows Russia. Like during the Cold War, it was all Russia and the socialist bloc in Eastern Europe. And I think all that skills and that knowledge of Russian, ability to understand the culture and what they're saying and read between the lines and all of that, I think that just went away. So I think that's, probably part of the reason why they just rely on the Ukraine says. Ukraine says they killed 10,000 Russians today. Okay, well, that's a fact now. That's U.S. intelligence, right? We just accept it, right? I think that's part of the reason that it's all now just Ukraine. Not that they have anyone who speaks Ukrainian. Obviously, the language is very similar, but I think that's part of it. But I think another part is also that they're just delivering the intelligence that the political people expect and approve of, just the same as had happened during the weapons of mass destruction back with Iraq in 2003. So I think there's a little bit of everything there. But what I told you actually happened. I heard this from both ends, and it just doesn't make the CIA look very good. I mean, they had a total. It's a good guy, smart guy, but total amateur dilettante generalist, with no language knowledge, no culture knowledge, no knowledge of the Shia, Islamic religion, in a position where he had to tell, basically directly or indirectly, had to tell President Carter or President Reagan, how the Islamic Revolution is going to go. And he was just winging it. He was just making it up as he went along. And obviously it was totally wrong. So, did that impact policy? Did that impact, Carter's apparent paralysis on Iran? I don't know. It could have, maybe we'll never know. All right. Stay tuned for another edition. I'm going to wrap this up. I just want to say, I have some, for those who are coming and they're new and they haven't seen my videos before, I have a really good video. If you scroll down, it's, about, I don't know, 6 or 8 or 10 videos. It's called The Fall of the Azov. And it's about the Azov surrendering in Mariupol. So I guess this probably would have been about mid to late May. But it's also a political history of the Ukraine since 2014 to include an explanation of how these swastika tattooed fascistoids got onto the payroll of the Ukrainian government, right? It's a very interesting question. How did it actually happen? And I answer this, and you won't hear this anywhere else. You won't hear this anywhere else. Although it's really, frankly, in Ukraine, it's common knowledge. But anyway, check that out. I think, if you're new, you'll like it. And I hope to see you again soon. I'm going to leave you with some really fateful music that I think Russians will appreciate. And everyone else, I'll leave you guessing until maybe next time. See you soon. Thank you.